always used to lay you clean up the messes. Down on my knees, thought I couldn't stand up on my own. Turns out sometimes you're stronger alone.
My name is Alyssa. I'm 35 years old. I was raised Jehovah's Witness. I was shunned and disfellowshipped at 17 years old.
Right, Alyssa, so how did you come to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses in the first place?
Well, I was unfortunately born into it. My parents were both really kind of still new into it. They joined when my oldest sister was 2 years old, and they were real still excited about it. They were trying to be elder, pioneer. So when I was born into it, it was a strong family, as opposed to the strong as opposed to the weak. We were a very strong family.
So at that point, they were elders and pioneers, or they were just aspiring in elders and pioneers?
I believe my dad was still aspiring, but my mom actually had just signed up to be a full-time pioneer when she found out she was pregnant with me, and that ruined her life because, surprise baby number 3 came along and ruined her pioneer plans.
Oh, and you know this because you were told such?
I was told a lot of times that I was the accident, I was the unwanted, that I ruined her plans, that I was the unexpected. And I was reminded throughout my entire life, oh, I just signed up for pioneering and then you came along. And yeah, so I was told that a lot.
Wow. Oh, I'm so sorry. It's brutal that anyone would ever be told by a parent that they are an accident or anything other than, I'm not really a fan of the word blessing, but a good thing, something beneficial to the family, and a wanted part of that family. That's, and especially when you're talking child or knocking on doors for a prescribed amount of time, certainly we would think, even in the witness ideology, that children are more important.
Yeah.
So that's quite an auspicious start.
It's all downhill from here. I'm terribly sorry. That's the highlight of this whole thing.
Understood. Well, something to look forward to. So you're born into a situation. I mean, and I understand, for a witness, and I think especially for a witness woman, being a pioneer is kind of like, what is that thing you can do other than maybe marrying an elder or something? There's just not a lot of opportunities for women to find identity in the organization in any real way. And it's really, that's sad too, that they would have to get it through that. But so your parents are obviously trying to find their identity through it, whether it's pioneering, whether it's being an elder, whatever the case may be. What about you? What did it mean to you being introduced, just being born into it?
I never really had a close relationship with Jehovah. I never felt that love and that passion. I never felt that connection, but I always tried to fake it. I always tried to be the best little Jehovah's Witness child. I was very active in the congregation to where I commented all the time. I devoted myself at a very early age. I was actually baptized at 9 years old, which is very young. I was the youngest one of that group. I believe it was like 30, 40 people at the assembly. I was 9 years old. And I tried to go door to door. I held Bible studies. I did my parts, the little parts that women do get in the congregation. I thought that was what was going to make my parents love me, was to just be this good little Jehovah's Witness child. And I felt guilty my whole life not having that connection. I didn't pray at night. I didn't pray in the morning. I didn't connect to Jehovah the way I thought I should be connecting to him. And I always carried that guilt, and it always made me feel like that outcast, feel like well, maybe I'm not as strong as I thought I was. Maybe I'm not the good Jehovah's Witness kid that I thought I was. So it carried a lot of guilt behind it, especially after I became baptized at such a young age. I thought maybe getting baptized would be the connection to God that I was missing, that I was lacking. And I felt nothing afterwards. I felt incomplete still. And I was like, crap, it didn't fill that hole. And now I'm lost still. So it didn't really mean anything to me other than trying to get my parents' approval and love.
Oh, Jesus got the Spirit coming down like a dove, so to speak, in the Bible, and I think that that's when those things are talked about. Sometimes, especially as kids, we do feel like there's going to be some change. I mean, they hype this thing up to be, you get baptized, and it's just you're so close to Jehovah, and I mean, I totally identify with what you're saying. I never felt a real connection there. I did things because it was, quote, the right thing to do, but I don't know who the heck is this guy that I'm supposed to be connecting to that I can't talk to and that I can't see. It's very difficult to connect to something like that for a lot of people, especially as a child.
Especially when you're told not to question it. You can't ask questions about it. And what is a child's mind other than a sponge questioning everything? Your favorite question for the longest time is why? Why? And when you don't get the answers and you don't get the clarification, then you don't get the connection. Mm-hmm. So when I started asking some why questions after being baptized at a very young age, it was just don't question it. Who are you to question God's authority? Who are you to question this Bible? The answers that you need are right here in the Bible, and they just weren't there.
So when you got baptized at 9 years old, were you the driving force behind that? I mean, I know that the driving force was wanting your parents' approval and this and this connection with Jehovah. But I mean, were you really into it, or was anybody saying you should? Like, how did that come about for a 9-year-old to feel like you needed to make this lifelong contract as they see it?
I remember they made the announcement in the Kingdom Hall in a meeting. I don't remember which meeting it was, but we were there. And they said, if anyone's wanting to get baptized at the upcoming assembly, please come up to the elders. And I mentioned it to my dad. And he says, well, honey, I think you're still maybe just a little bit too young, maybe next year. Because I was going to be almost turning 10. So he thought, maybe next year it'll be closer and it'll be better. And I actually went behind his back and spoke to the elders myself. And I said, I want to get baptized. And they said, well, why do you want to get baptized? And I said, because it's what I'm supposed to do. And that should have been red flag number one to them. Like it wasn't because it was in my heart. It wasn't because any other reason other than that's what I'm supposed to do, right? So the elders okayed it, and I started going through the whole questioning process to become baptized.
Wow, that was your response, and they still let you at 9 years old get baptized. Wow, that is shame on them for pushing you through like that. That's terrible. Yeah. I mean, I've known of, there are elders who will say, yeah, I don't think you're ready, or I don't think you're doing this for the right reason. I mean, I don't like any of it, but at least sometimes they'll try to slow your roll a little bit. They're like, oh yeah, you're 9 years old. It's the right thing to do. I can't argue with that. Yeah. Wow.
And I think my dad was an elder at that time, so he could have done the elder veto no vote for it, and I don't think he did. I think everyone was just so excited to have the youngest member baptized from their congregation at the assembly. I think it was more of an excitement rather than, is she really understanding this? It was just a bragging right.
Yes, I remember a young lady who was maybe 8, I think, who was related to our presiding overseer growing up. And I remember she wasn't even in our hall. We saw her at times when they would visit, but when she got baptized, our congregation was even, just so excited that here this 8-year-old is getting baptized. And it's really warped when you think about it, that all of these adults are like, oh, she knows, she has such strong faith. She's 8. That's She believes in, I don't know, whatever she was exposed to. Otherwise, other kids, you'd be like, oh, she believes in Santa Claus. She believes, the witnesses kind of ruin a lot of that, but she could have believed in Santa Claus still if, provided with that. So,
Wow.
yeah, you're just a kid. What do you know?
You don't know anything, and you're still grasping language at that point. You're still
Yes.
grasping basic concepts, and I was told so many times, you're so old for your age, you're so mature for your age, you act so much older. And that's so damaging to a kid at 9 years old, because then you feel like you can't be a kid. If you be a kid, you let them down. So now you just keep acting older and older and older and older and older, because that's what's getting you the approval and the attention that you so desperately want at that age. So now I'm trying to live up to that expectation. And at 9 years old, got baptized at the assembly. They announced it. People came seeking for me, as almost as if I was like a saint to touch. Like, oh, let me give you a hug. Let me touch you. You're so spiritual, and they felt strong connection to me, even though I didn't know them, because they thought I was this ultimate being for simply getting baptized at 9 years old. It was just so weird. It was so strange. And it was really mentally damaging. It honestly was.
Oh, sure. I think a lot of witness kids, obviously not all, but I think a lot of witness kids are forced to grow up way too young. I mean, whether it's just being concerned about the end of the world at 3 years old or 4 years old, or whether it's just being told that, you are an old soul, or we were made to act like little adults, little buttoned up suit and tie, dress and shoes, whatever. We were, hair all done, made to be little mini adults walking around, going to strangers' doors and telling other adults how they were supposed to live their lives. That's not normal progression of childhood behavior and adolescent development.
It's not. And it actually was exploiting me at 9 years old, making me go and talk to these older people at the doors, because then these older people feel guilty and they feel an obligation to sit there and listen to me. And I believe that's how I got half of the people to even listen to my spiel and invite me in and all this other, because they felt, well, I need to get this 10-year-old, this 10-year-old off the streets and into my home and give her a hot chocolate or something because it's snowing outside or it's pouring rain. And they exploited the young little innocent face at their door to get their foot in the door. And then once I got their attention and I got their interest, an adult actually would come and take over. Like normally my mom would take over that Bible study and that would be hers until I got old enough to lead my own Bible studies. But they were using my face, drawing these people in, and then taking them over for themselves.
Absolutely. It is exploitation. And it's somebody else who was on the podcast. I can't remember who it was. It was fairly recent, but their parents would have them go up to the door, and then the parents would act like they're looking for him and then be like, oh, is he up here bothering you with the message or whatever? He's just so passionate about it. And then that is so contrived. And it is so, like, as an adult, you should be embarrassed to do that. And the fact that you aren't is really sad. I mean, it's the complete exploitation of your child.
They feel pride in it. Like that was the only things that I felt that my parents were proud of me, was when I was being this faithful and discreet slave. this good little witness going door to door and spreading the word. I felt that was the only time they were actually proud of me, because it was the only time they actually expressed being proud of me.
Well, yeah, for many, getting baptized is that day too, because that's, you have no holidays, you have no birthdays. And for many people, getting baptized is that one day that they can kind of count on, that everybody's kind of fawn over them and make a big deal out of you, because now you've done the one thing that they all want you to do. And some people get little parties or gifts or things. And for a kid, I mean, that's what you've been looking for your whole life, is any kind of praise or positive attention for something that you did. And of course, it's still within the confines of the cult, but that's your chance to shine.
Yeah, exactly. And then I got to pick where we went to dinner after the assembly that day. And that was a big thing because I was the baby child. So my older sisters always got to pick. But then you get the anniversary. So it's like your birthday every year from there. So every year I got to celebrate me on that day. So
Wait a minute. This is not something that I've been privy to. So in your family, you all celebrated the anniversary of your baptism?
As if it was a birthday.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that adds another layer of I mean, it's kind of exploitative itself. It's, we got you to do this thing and now we're going to keep celebrating it to reinforce it. Wow, interesting. Never heard of that.
It actually encouraged the middle sister, so she's a couple years older than me. It actually encouraged her eventually to get baptized because she saw the attention I was getting and didn't like that. So she got baptized later in life. I can't even remember how old she was. I don't pay attention to her story, but she was a couple years later that she got baptized because she's kept seeing, oh, well, Alyssa gets gifts on that day and Alyssa gets celebration on that day still. So why don't I do it?
Wow. So that's interesting. So what's that?
I thought everyone did that, just celebrated their anniversary like that.
It's not something that that I think has ever come up on any episodes. I don't think that anybody's ever mentioned it. Yeah, I don't think I've ever necessarily heard of that. I mean, it makes sense. I can understand it being a thing. Actually, it seems like a smart thing for them to do, to be honest, even though I'm not a fan of that. Because it's more manipulation, but yeah, that's fair enough. That I can see that being helpful to their ends. So you weren't really connecting to Jehovah, so to speak. What about the world around you? Were you going to school? How did you see like the kids around you, if that's the case?
I only was in public school until 4th grade.
Okay.
And that was in 4th grade was the year that I actually asked my parents, because my older sisters were homeschooled. And I actually asked my parents, can I be homeschooled too? Because I don't like being around all the worldly kids. And they said, well, why? And I don't think I ever actually told them why, but there was this one girl in my 4th grade class that every morning for the Pledge of Allegiance, she would come up and put her other hand over my heart, because she thought it was just so disrespectful that I was not putting my hand over my heart. And then they did, that 4th grade was Christmas parties and birthday parties, and they did more than any other grade did before. And I felt so left out. I was like, this is so hard. I don't want to go to middle school. I don't want to go to high school like this. I don't want to be around that. So I actually asked my parents if I could homeschool. They pulled me out and I started homeschooling in the 5th grade. And I was homeschooled from then on.
Doing the math, would 4th grade have also kind of corresponded with the age at which you got baptized?
Yeah. I couldn't understand why none of my classmates are so happy that I was getting baptized. Because they were like, my mom baptized me when I was a baby. Why are you not getting baptized at that age? And I was like, well, my religion does it different. And I was just so excited. I actually wanted to bring cupcakes to celebrate my baptism to class.
Oh, that's sweet and also really heartbreaking.
Yeah, because I wanted something to celebrate with them, because they got to celebrate all this other stuff, and I wanted to celebrate something of mine. And when the worldly kids were not responding the way I wanted them to, I was like, this is too hard. I want to homeschool. And I actually told my mom, now that I'm baptized, if you homeschool me, I can go pioneer with you. So I got homeschooled and didn't really like, Wednesdays and Saturdays were our service days. So I would get Wednesdays and Saturdays off of school to go pioneer with my mom. So it was my little manipulative way of getting out of public school. But then I had to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning on Wednesdays and go out in service. So
Well, it was your manipulative way of getting out of going to public school that you didn't want to attend because of their manipulation that made you so different from everybody else in school.
yeah.
And so therefore you would want to escape that environment. And then was pioneering used as part of your school curriculum? Was that like your sociology or something? You know, a lot of witness parents use it as some BS.
It was reading, because on Tuesday nights,
Reading.
I got home from, well, it was multiple things, but reading was one of the big ones, because Tuesday nights after we got home from the meetings, my mother would say, you know, why don't you prepare some scriptures to share tomorrow in service? So I would go through and do my reading. I would write a little paragraph, so there was some writing in there. I had to know my history and science, because when you have people out in service trying to counter you with actual history and actual science, you had to actually know that. So I was actually very good at spitting facts at people, because I was learning them at home in order to not to know them, but to try to disprove them. Gotcha. So it was used a little bit as my service, but my mom did not really push school on us. So it wasn't really a program until my high school years. It wasn't a program of testing and turning something in. She kind of molded her own schooling until high school, when I took an actual online high school. And that's when my life started questioning a whole lot more, because now I'm learning outside information rather than just what my mom was teaching me.
We'll jump there in a minute, but I got to ask you, Penn Foster, American?
Penn Foster.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, there's only so many that the witnesses tend to use. So I believe my youngest sister was Penn Foster.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, because they were Thompson High School whenever I did it. And now that they're Penn Foster, my daughter actually does Penn Foster, but not the same reasons. It's just, that's a whole nother story, but she does Penn Foster for high school, and she's going to be 16 and she'll graduate next year.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. All right. Well, so school then was not an environment. Well, it ended up becoming a witness environment too. At the meetings, you know, your parents, you said, were elder and aspiring pioneer, and I guess you got to pioneer once you kids could go out with her too. So you weren't connecting to Jehovah, so to speak. Did you connect to the congregation? Did you feel at all? Did you have friends? Did you like doing any of the stuff?
I had a lot of friends, because I grew up in the same congregation from the time I was younger to the time I was just fellowshipped. I was in the same congregation. So 17 years of, you know, some of these people were at the hospital when I was born, and they became family to me. They became, you know, I had multiple sets of parents because I was best friends with their kids, and I connected with them on the friendly basis. I loved going to conventions and assemblies for more connection. but we were actually part of the quick build crew. And I've been on quick builds, part of construction, since I was 5 years old. Like as soon as I was allowed actually on the property, I've been there. And sorry, the allergies are bad out here.
Understood. Mine too.
I actually ran part of the crew. We were insulation and ceiling tile. And I actually was part of, my dad was like the head of that. So whenever we had new people coming in trying to volunteer their time to help, like he's like, okay, well, this group's going to go with my wife, and this group's going to go with me, and this group's going to go with my daughter. And I was like 12 years old at the time. And they're like, what am I going to learn from her? And I was like, I've been doing this since I was able to walk. Come with me. I'll teach you how to do it. So I loved going to the quick builds, and I connected a lot with that because I felt like I was actually doing something worthwhile. And then I got to connect with all my friends there. I've met so many people through the quick builds, and that the reason why I liked the conventions was because I got to reconnect with them all the time. This was life before internet and cell phones. So the conventions were your reconnect.
Understood. I didn't have any of those things either. So you were actually learning a skill, insulation. My wife did insulation too, so she'll be excited to see somebody else who did that. But you were also in kind of a rare position as a 12-year-old girl in the congregation to be able to kind of feel like you had knowledge and leadership in some way. That had to have been unique, to feel like people were being sent to you to learn something and you got to teach them or show them the ropes in some way. That must have been pretty cool.
It was pretty cool. And actually, because they did end up changing the rules around that time on the quick build to where under a certain age weren't allowed into the actual, they could work like in the gardens and that kind of stuff on outside, but they weren't allowed in the buildings. But they made special arrangements for me because they knew me. They knew I was an actual worker. I wasn't in there goofing off. Goofing off came later in life. Trust me, we goofed off plenty when I was a teenager, but at 12 years old, they knew that I was just going to get in there. I knew my job. I knew my safety. And then they would just hide me whenever the inspectors would come through. So like, I'd be like off in the corner behind a bunch of insulation and sheetrock when the inspectors came through. So they didn't see that there was a miner in there, but they made special arrangements for me to continue doing it because they knew I was actually really good at it and I was taking it seriously. And that was, once again, I acted too old for my age. So
yeah, that's true. That's true. A shame it has to be for that, but
yeah.
Allow me to break in here for a second. This channel is made possible by you, the listener. If you appreciate what we're doing here, please consider supporting at patreon.com/shunned, or leave a review on iTunes or other platforms. Like and subscribe. All those things help the channel. If you're looking for merch, you can go get some Shun swag from the shunnedpodcast.com website, or reach out there to be on the show. If you're looking for more ex-Jehovah's Witness content, I'll recommend my first podcast called This JW Life. You can find that on podcast apps as well as YouTube. And if you're feeling stuck in life, struggling to find happiness and community, maybe you're haunted by the past, beating yourself up, unsure of who you are or what you even want out of life now that you've lost this one identity that was given to you by a cult, reach out through my other sites like exjwhelp.com, that's exjwhelp.com, or storyworkscoaching.com. And let's see about working together to help you find a life that fits you and who you are, maybe for the first time ever. And now, back to our guest. So what was the temperature of your house, so to speak, growing up? So obviously you all were very involved in witness theocratic activity, as they would say. Were you all a close family? Was the environment inside your home loving? Did you all feel like you all were really kind of a team in all of this?
No. Hated my middle sister with a passion, and still working through that hate. She was a horrible person, absolutely horrible to me. we never really got along. And the only time that we actually somewhat got along was because she was manipulating me to keep her secrets when we were teenagers. My oldest sister, she moved out when I was 8 because she was 10 years older than me, 8, 10, somewhere around there. I can't even remember because I don't talk to her either. But I just remember she got away as quickly as possible. She hated it. Like 3 days before she turned 18, she was moving out. And she did it when we were on, I think we were at a quick build. So the house was to her. She's like, I have to stay here because I'm working. We came back, she was gone.
Wow, when you said she hated it and had to get away, she hated that witness life or that home life?
Both.
Or both? Okay.
So she was never really a strong witness. She did get baptized, but she was never really a strong one. And she wanted to do her worldly things. She wanted to hang out with her worldly friends. She wanted to go to her worldly job. She wanted out of it. So she kind of did it slowly to where when she moved out, she would still come to the meeting every now and then, but then use work as an excuse. But she was dating worldly guys. She just was not telling the family that. Home life, it wasn't horrible. Okay, so don't think that I was horribly abused. There was some abuse going on. My father was just a very emotionally absent father. He would come home, the 5 o'clock, dinner better be on the table, open my beer, and he would sit in front of the TV for the rest of the evening. Didn't really connect with him. He wanted a son so bad that he kind of used me as his son because I was the third daughter. He didn't get his son. So when we did connect, it was usually over working on the car and working in the garage and building things with our hands. So he was teaching me more like that, but that was the only time we really connected. I tried to connect to him because he was a musician and he played guitar and he sang. And my mom sang. They actually had a band that they played like the Jehovah's Witness weddings and parties and that kind of thing. So I tried to connect with them by picking up guitar, picking up singing, hanging in the garage while they were practicing, doing that kind of stuff. But he was just emotionally absent. I don't think he knew how to be present in everyone's lives. He was not physically abusive. He spanked me one time and cried his eyes out. So, I'm thankful for that.
Sure.
My mom had some mental health issues for sure. I think she just didn't know how to be a parent. She didn't know how to be a mom, and she would yell and scream, and we were constantly in fights. We never really got along. She threw Bibles at my head when we were having our hardest times. I was sitting at the table doing my homework one time and we were fighting over math because in my brain, math should be easy because it's a formula, it's strict, it's fact. But she couldn't explain it to me. And there was a bookcase behind me and she got so mad that she actually pushed the bookcase down onto my head and I went headfirst into the table. She probably doesn't remember that because she doesn't remember half the things that she did to me. I didn't do that. That didn't happen.
Yeah, that could be memory. That can also be gaslighting, but
yeah. She's definitely a gaslighter. The things that happened between me and my sister, my middle sister, she was horrible to me. Absolutely. I have scars on my hands from her nails digging into me. I have mental scars from the things that she said to me. She would lean in real close to me and be like, "You were never wanted. We all know that." And then when I would yell back at her, my mom would get mad at me because I'm the one yelling. So she favored this middle child because she was the only planned one. My oldest sister was a mistake. The middle child was planned. I was a mistake. So
So as long as there's pre-planning and control, then it's okay. But if there's a lack of control, then that kid is not wanted.
Yeah.
Okay.
And my mom could not control me. Once I started questioning life and once I started having my own thoughts and feelings about it, she couldn't control me. She could control my sister all she wanted because my sister was a people pleaser. She thought, as long as I just make mom and dad love me, then everything's okay. And she used to say, oh, I have dad wrapped around my little finger. And I was like, you can have dad wrapped around your little finger. I want freedom. I want choice. I want knowledge. I want that life. You can have that. But it was always a competition with my middle sister. So,
but that's also not love. I've got this person wrapped around my finger. That's manipulation, that's control, that's coercion. That's not necessarily love. That's just not healthy.
Yeah. She learned it from them. She learned that if you felt like you had someone wrapped around your finger, and then that was love. And I mean, we know it's not, but they don't recognize that it's not love. To her, she was the favorited child. And to the parents that they knew, I know they're never going to actually admit it, but they did favor her. She got everything she wanted. She got everything, all the love, the attention, and the understanding. She got the unconditional love. And we'll get to why here in a little while, but she got the unconditional love. I did not. So it was not a loving home. We did travel. My parents did make sure to get us out, and we went camping all the time. We went to new places all the time. But I think that was more that they wanted to do it, and they just had to drag these kids along rather than wanting us to have that experience. So my childhood was not all bad. I did have a lot of experience, I learned a lot of skills. I can still work on a car today. I learned the art from my mom, I guess. I learned a lot from them. I didn't learn love.
That would be a paramount thing to try to learn from your family.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, at the end of the day, abuse is part of the reason abuse is abusive is because it's confusing. The person who on one hand is supposed to be nurturing to you, or who is teaching you things in one moment and appears loving, the next moment is screaming at you and making you feel small and like you don't belong or you're not wanted. That's how it's abusive. It's not, abusers aren't abusive all the time. And but at the end of the day, it is important to also acknowledge and understand that there were good moments, and those things can still be genuine on their own merit, and good memories, even though they were surrounded by other things that were not so good.
I was under I was fully aware from the time I was very young to the time I got out that if I did not follow their path, then I would not have them. So it was the emotional manipulation of, you're going to do this and you're going to do this and you're going to do this, or you're not going to have us. And I was fully.
Yeah, there's an attachment there. You talk about secure attachment. There's no secure attachment ever, because we all knew, all of us, that at any moment that hammer could drop and it was over.
Sorry, my dogs are out back if you can hear them barking.
You got something to say too.
Yeah.
So you're growing up in this environment. You mentioned, things changing a little bit as you got into your teenage years. If there's anything that we're overlooking or skipping that was maybe a seminal moment prior to that, feel free to speak up. Otherwise, if you want to, kind of explain a little bit about how your teenage years went.
Teenage years is kind of where I started having my rebellious phase. And so in order to kind of tell you why my rebellious phase, I am a very gifted person in the chest area. I've always been really small, but I've had large breasts. And I know that doesn't sound like it makes a big deal, but when you are 10 years old, having an elder tell you, you need to put a different shirt on because your breasts are distracting to the congregation. And I was told your clothing is too tight. Okay, well, I can't control my clothing because I get hand-me-downs from my sisters, and my parents don't go and buy me new stuff. So I can't control the size of my clothing. So I ended up wearing very baggy clothing. Well, then I was accused of being frumpy. So I was like,
now you're sloppy. Yeah.
So in my teenage years, when I started developing more, going through puberty, and the boys started noticing, I went very much towards being a tomboy. I was one of the guys. I was dirty all the time. I was on dirt bikes. I was working on the cars with them. I really went into being a tomboy because I had been sexualized at such a young age because of my body that I felt, okay, I don't want to be that girl. I don't want to be the hot one, because my sister was the hot one. Everybody thought she was so gorgeous. She was so pretty. All the boys had crushes on her. I didn't want to be that. I didn't want to be overly sexualized in this congregation. I just wanted to blend in. So I became the tomboy. So I had a lot of guy friends. I did not have a lot of girlfriends because the girls in the congregation were backstabbers, and I knew it. So I didn't want anything to do with that. I started questioning a lot more of, why am I a Jehovah's Witness? Why can I find that connection? Can I find that empty hole? Can I fill that empty hole that I feel is not there? And I couldn't. And I got more and more frustrated with myself. And then I started becoming interested in boys, and that's a no-no at 15 years old. We all know that. You do not look at a boy until you're ready to marry a boy. So I actually got a boyfriend in another congregation that I met at an assembly. Or no, I met him at a party, but it was a Jehovah's Witness party, like a graduation or something. Met him there, reconnected at the assembly, and then we started dating, talking on AOL every now and then.
Instant messenger, right? Hey.
So when my parents found out about that, it was because I felt guilty that I kissed him the next time I saw him. And I felt so guilty that I wrote this whole letter to my dad. I put it on a magnet on the fridge that he would pass on his way to work, on his way out. And I confessed everything. I've been talking to this boy. I'm so sorry. I kissed him. I feel so guilty. Nothing else has happened, I promise. And we were made to cut off contact. So that's when I really started looking into, well, I'm just a teenager. I'm a normal teenager wanting to have normal teenager experiences. And the control really came down on me then. And then that was really questioning of, well, you want me to not date until I'm ready to get married to someone, but that seems like a really bad recipe for a marriage, to just jump into a marriage with someone just because you want to have that connection. So I was about 16 that a couple of my older friends were turning 18 and getting married immediately rushing into marriages. And they were telling me how unhappy they were. And they're like, this is not good. Like, I want out. This person's not the person I thought they would be. We can't find a way to live together. They were so unhappy. And I was like, well, that doesn't seem like that's what Jehovah wants. Why would Jehovah want you to be stuck in this marriage now that you can't get out of? Because you can't divorce, you can't walk away. So I really started questioning things at about 16. And I started having my real rebellious phase. I remember I got pulled into the elder's office because, once again, my shirt was too tight and I was distracting the boys in the congregation. So I was like, you know what? I'm tired of this. I started dressing slutty. Like, I was wearing the tight skirts and I was wearing the low cut shirts. And I was like, if you want to sexualize me, I'm going to show you what sexualizing is. So I started wearing black lipstick, wearing black nail polish, dyed my hair black. I went full goth. I went full rebellious. I was a pioneer at the time, so they were yeah, it was really weird.
They allowed you to continue pioneering?
Yes, they did. And they tried to really pull back and control my dress and my actions, you shouldn't wear the black lipstick. And I was like, what do you want me to do? I wear red lipstick, you call me a harlot. I wear pink lipstick, you call me a slut. I do anything and you're just attacking the way I look. And I started getting so mad at them. I was like, what do you want me to wear next to just showing up in a man's suit? Because you cannot tell a 16, 17-year-old, 15, 16, 17, you're being too sexually, you're dressing too sexually, you're being too sexual. And I'm like, okay, what do you want me to do?
Yeah, that's like predator behavior, telling kids that the kid is adults telling kids the kid's being too sexual at that age. I mean, that's one of the excuses that predators make. This child came on to me, you're an adult, right? What's wrong with you? And I'm glad, honestly, that you're mentioning this, because this is something that it has come up before on the podcast. It comes up at times in my coaching sessions. It is something where a lot of young ladies, well, heck, I was watching the what's it called? It's out right now. Shiny Happy People, about the Duggars on Amazon Prime, and about the IBPL, I think, that they were involved in. And it is there's just so much sexualization of kids and worry about it. And then it ends up creating other issues because people are so repressed, and because people are being sexualized all the time, and now that's on the mind all the time. And it's a horrible situation. I'm so sorry that something that's out of your control and that you shouldn't be ashamed of anyway was used to shame you and to make you feel bad about your body or your presentation, who you are. It's just all the gross innuendo and everything that comes along with it from those people. It's horrible.
It is. And it made me feel so dirty, and it made me feel like my body was dirty, because like you said, these are grown men. You should not be sexualizing a child. You should not be looking at them in any sort of sexual way, but they did. And I didn't realize, that until I got older and looked back, and it was like one of those moments where you're just sitting there making dinner and all of a sudden you go, ew. Mm-hmm. They actually did that to me. And they did it from such a young age. I can remember being so naive one day, and I was probably about 12 or 13, and I didn't have toenail polish on my toes, and I was wearing open-toed sandals, and one of the men in the congregation was joking with another man, and he was like, you need to put some red toenail polish on them toes. And I was like, why? And he's like, because they look gross without it. And I was like, okay, all right. But looking back, I'm like, did you have a foot fetish? Ew.
Well, whether or not there was a fetish, it's still just like, what are you doing? Like, why are you commenting on some kid's toes or outfit or anything else? Why is that your business? Why is that in your purview? It's just lack of boundaries and creepy old men, and it's real weird. I'm sorry. That's got to be a horrible position to be in.
It was, and then it was ingrained in my brain that I had to look good for the men in the congregation.
Yeah.
So, but then when you started looking good for the men in the congregation, then you started becoming more and more sexualized and hit on. And when you start getting that attention that your whole life you have been craving for, you want the cuddles and the love and the hugs and someone to compliment you and someone to tell you you're worthy because you weren't getting that from your parents. And now all of a sudden here at 17 years old, I was getting it. And when I realized I could not do it in the congregation, because I did try to date a boy in the congregation, got caught, but it was somebody I grew up with. So we were really close friends, but when we got caught, we were no longer allowed to talk to each other. So now they start separating your friendships, people who you grew up with, people who you've known your whole life. Now all of a sudden you can't do that because now he's a boy and you're a girl. When they never separated that when we were younger, but now that we are 17, 18, they're separating it.
That's really sad. The witnesses seem to not believe that members of the opposite sex can be friends, and that's really, really sad to take away half the population, so to speak, as far as your options for friendship in this world or connection at any level. That's really sad. And I mean, things do change to some degree, but they are so much more obsessed with sex than the world is.
Yeah. And then you couldn't be friends with the girls in the congregation at that age because you're competition.
Oh, yeah.
So when there's such a small pool of boys that you can choose from, now you're competition and they don't want to be friends with you. And they became backstabbers just to get at the boy in the congregation that they were wanting. But then when those boys in the congregation didn't want you, you had to go out and look other places. So when I realized I couldn't date in the congregation, I found worldly boys. And worldly boys didn't have the same morals as the Jehovah's Witness boys. So I got into some trouble real fast. That was when I did lose my virginity. And I was drinking, I was partying with people in the neighborhood, I was sneaking out all the time, just doing really dangerous things that could have been, you could ease a teenager into that. Like my daughter's a teenager and you can ease them into that life to where you provide a safer place for them to date. You provide a safer place for them to get to know the opposite sex rather than having to sneak behind the back. Because I'm fully aware if I did not allow my daughter to do some things, she's going to sneak behind my back. That's just what teenagers do. So I was sneaking around. I was getting into all kinds of trouble, still pretending to be a pioneer at this time, mind you. I remember knocking on doors, hung over as all get out, just 7 a.m., just ouch. Trying to hide that lifestyle. And I was living a double life because you could not have the teenage experience and be a Jehovah's Witness at the same time.
Couldn't be authentic. You had an authentic you that was trying to get out, but it doesn't, it's incongruous with Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah. So I actually hooked up with several worldly boys, and I felt very guilty about it. But at the same time that I was doing this, my middle sister, remember the middle sister over here, mom and dad's favorite, was also sneaking out with me and drinking and hooking up with worldly boys. So that's when we actually started having some sort of a relationship because she was manipulating me to keep those secrets.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, can I ask, was she also equally willing to keep your secrets? Or was that more of a one-way street as far as those things went?
It was more of a one-way street. She threatened to tell all the time. If I did not do what she wanted me to do, she threatened to tell. So
that's mutual destruction at that point.
Yeah. So I got tired of having her manipulate me in that way. Like I had to be her little personal maid, pretty much. I was doing her laundry. I was doing her chores. I was helping her out with different things. And because she was keeping my secret. So I felt I'm done with this. And I wrote a letter because I can't face my parents. So I wrote a letter of explaining everything that happened. I left it on the fridge. But I was also dating a worldly boy at the time. And I told them about him too. And, my dad read the letter and he was like, so are you pregnant? I said, no. And he said, are you in some sort of trouble? I said, no. He said, so why would you tell us? And I said, because you always taught me that if I felt guilty and wanted to be forgiven, I needed to repent for my sins. So I'm repenting. Well, he wanted me to break up with the boy. He wanted me to go to the elders and tell the elders everything. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. I feel guilty. I feel like I'm not being a good daughter. I'm not being a good Jehovah's Witness. I'm not being a good person. And that's when I said, I don't think I can break up with him because I really liked him. A dumb teenager. I thought he was going to be the love of my life. And my dad kicked me out.
So he just threw you out in the moment? I mean, was this you've got 24 hours to get out, or some sort of time, or just you won't do what we want, so there's the door?
I think I had a couple hours, but he said, if you're not going to live the life that you're supposed to live, then you need to get out. So I called the guy I was dating, and he came and picked me up, and I was packing some bags in my room while my mom was sitting on my bed, bawling her eyes out. I packed some bags and I turned around and I said, just do what you want with the rest of it. And I got out.
So it's just curious to me that your dad wasn't willing. I mean, did he himself try to have any conversations with you? Did he try to save you? Did he try to be a father in that moment and sit down with his daughter and just have conversation about what's going on internally or anything like that? Or was it just like, hey, here's the options, here's the rules and regulations, here are the options, and you either do these or you're choosing to leave?
He tried to have a little bit of conversation, but it was from an elder standpoint, not a father standpoint. It was, what you're doing is wrong. I can appreciate that you repented and you want to talk about it, but you're going to have to stop. You're going to have to straighten up, and you're going to have to face the consequences. And I knew what the consequences were. It was losing everything. It was disfellowshipped. It was losing everything I've ever known. So I guess part of me didn't want to face those consequences right away at 17. That's scary to lose everything. Yeah. So I think part of me was using this boy that I was dating to run away from the consequences. So when I told my dad that I loved him, I loved this boy and I didn't want to let him go, it was pretty much, well, if you can't live by our rules, then you need to get out. And then from there, there was no trying to stop me. The guy pulled up. I put my bags on the porch. The guy loaded them in the car, and I left.
Was your dad visibly upset?
I could tell he was upset, but he was too stern to show it. I think my mom was only crying because it was the manipulation cry. It was the so dramatic. It was the manipulation cry. I think she finally realized that she was losing control and there was nothing she could do. And I think he was just so stern and so stoic about it that I think maybe he was upset later, but he didn't really show it very much.
Well, sometimes, we have one parent who's more overtly abusive and, more obvious. Sometimes we have one that's more covertly so checked out, neglectful, whatever the case may be. It just depends on everyone's situations. But it sounds like your dad wasn't able to really, it sounds like he had maybe some trouble connecting himself in some ways. And that was coming out in this, because Jehovah's Witnesses, and you really see it a lot in there, judicial committees, they really don't connect a lot of times to the person in front of them. It's just, well, here's the rules, here's the regulations. Are you going to do this or not? Okay, you're not, get out. Okay, you are. All right, well, then you can stay. It's not always, anyway, it depends on the body. It depends on, the person and their relationship. I'm not trying to make a blanket statement, but there oftentimes it is kind of more about crime and punishment than emotional connection to individuals.
Yeah, they did become very cold, like very, very cold. I got disfellowship by letter because I didn't actually meet with the elders.
So how did the elders, let's back up a second. So how did the elders know in the first place? I guess
my dad said in the letter.
Okay, so your dad went to the rest of the elders to have you dealt with because you wouldn't meet with them. And what they do, send you like one of those summons basically to a judicial committee?
They called my cell phone trying to get me to go meet with them. And I told them I was not going to go meet with them, that I was done, that they could do whatever they wanted to. I was just not, I don't care. And I think it was about a month later, because it took them like 2 months to get a hold of me because I blocked everybody. So they had to like come up with new cell phone numbers to contact me. And I think it was about a month later, I get a letter in the mail, which I don't know. I still to this day don't know how they got my address. And it was a letter saying that I was disfellowshipped.
It's amazing how they can get addresses.
Yeah.
So you just got a letter that said you were disfellowshipped, not a summons to a judicial committee that if you don't show up to, you'll be disfellowshipped in absentia. They just sent you a letter that said you're out.
Yeah.
What did it feel like to open that letter?
I kind of knew it was coming, but then I had the feeling of betrayal of, wow, my dad actually did go through with this. My dad actually wants this religion so bad enough that he turned me over.
So then was there like a finality to getting that letter or anything? Like, was it, did it just kind of really hit that like, this is real now? Not just the betrayal of your father, which I totally understand. My dad turned in my younger brother and had the elders pursue him. So there's the betrayal, but then it's also kind of like does that letter make it all the more real?
It did. And I thought it was the final for my brain. And then I started having problems because, I've just lost everything. I've lost my family. I lost my friends. I lost my lifestyle. I lost everything. So I actually ended up trying to go back.
How long after being disfellowshipped did it take for you to start having that feeling?
I feel it was always there, but it grew within about 8 months. And I think I went back after 8 months. And I was a teenager out on my own and missing everything, missing my parents, even though they weren't the best parents in the world, you still have that indoctrination of wanting to be with your family and be with your friends. So I actually called my dad and I said, I'm thinking of coming back. What are your thoughts? And he said, you're welcome back, but you know the rules. You're going to have to go to every meeting. You're going to have to work on getting reinstated. You're going to have to work at it. And I said, okay. And he said, but first you're going to have to ask your sister for her permission.
Whoa.
And I was like, why? He said, because you hurt her real bad. I did what?
Oh, your sister is your mediator between you and Jehovah or something. What the heck?
So he gave me my sister's cell phone number and I called her and this is just my middle sister. My older sister's way out of the picture to the point she's not mad at me, my middle sister. And I said, I'm thinking of coming back, but Dad said that I needed to talk to you because I hurt you very much. And she said, you did hurt me, Alyssa. You hurt me bad by leaving. And I was like, what? How did it? I'm sorry that it hurt you, but how did it hurt you? She's like, because I lost my sister. And I was like, you didn't really treat me very well while I was there. So I'm kind of confused here. And I think what hurt her the most was because she was afraid of what I was going to tell them. I think she was afraid now that my secret's out and she doesn't have that over my head anymore. What was I going to tell the elders?
She's lost control. So she's trying to get control back.
Yeah. So she allowed me so graciously to return back to the house.
Wow. All right.
And I did go back and immediately went into, they weren't allowed to talk to me. Even though I was living in their home, I was not welcome at the dinner table. I was not welcome for conversation. It was very strictly, are you ready for the meeting? Get in the car. So I got in the car. I wasn't allowed to enter the building until the first prayer was going. And I was supposed to leave before the first prayer or the last prayer was over. So I would just sit and wait in the car, look at my watch, wait for the time, and then sit in the back. I was not welcome to sit with the family for a while. So leave. All the while, every person that I ever knew in my entire life looking away from me as if I was a leper in this congregation, just so cold to me. And I didn't have a meeting with the elders until maybe a couple weeks. And they asked what my intentions were. I said, well, my intentions are to be reinstated. And I know I'm going to have to serve some time in this disfellowship position. So when I feel ready, I'll write you a letter. And they said, okay. I believe it was about 6 months that I wrote my first letter of repentance, trying to get reinstated. Oh, and then I got a meeting with them after they read it and had their own meeting about it. And I got assigned a judicial committee of these men that never liked me. These were the same men that accused me of being a harlot, that accused me of being a slut, that accused me of all of these horrible things all my teenage years. So here's my judicial committee of these men that think that I'm just a terrible person.
Yeah, they're prejudiced before you walk in.
Yeah. They, first of all, told me that I had not served enough time. So I was like, okay, how much time do you think this deserves?
How much time does the Bible say that that I have to serve?
And they couldn't give me a time frame. And I was like, the letter did not have a sentence. It was not, you have to serve 12 years. It wasn't, you have to serve 2 years. The letter did not have a sentence. And they're like, well, we need to be able to see into your heart. And I was like, how can you see into my heart? You're not one of the anointed. God is not coming down onto your shoulder to whisper things into your ear. You can't see into my heart. I've shown up for every meeting. I've been here every time. I have dealt with complete isolation for 6 months at this point. I wasn't allowed to talk to witnesses or worldly. I sat in my room in complete isolation. So I got a little frustrated with them, but I was like, okay, we'll go a couple more months. We'll see how everything goes. So back to my sister, and I am going to tell a little bit of her story because it does deeply affect my end decision. Sure. She started dating this guy in the congregation. And we knew they were not being good. They had been seen in a Walmart parking lot in the back seat of his car. And my sister has always been a size 00, little bitty. And she started growing and growing and growing. She had weird cravings. She had this bottle of pills that she pulled the label off of in her bathroom, but they were rather large prenatal vitamins after I looked up the stamp on it. And I told my dad, I was like, you know, she's pregnant. And he's like, no, she's not. He's like, they're an approved couple in the congregation. They're fine. Well, then they get engaged. And I was like, she's pregnant. Listen to me. He didn't listen. And she convinced everyone to come to her wedding. Jehovah's Witnesses. It was a big Jehovah's Witness wedding. Everyone brought gifts. I think she felt guilty right at the end because she moved it from the Kingdom Hall to a reception hall. So she didn't get married in Kingdom Hall. And I think that was her own guilt. I was not invited to the wedding because I was still disfellowshipped. My worldly grandma came to the wedding and sat there and pouted the whole time because she was like, why isn't your sister here? What? She's family. Why isn't your sister here? And she was mad. She's like, this is no excuse to not have your sister at your wedding. And my grandma was not happy. A month later, after their wedding, they realized they could not hide this baby any longer because they just got married and now she's 5 months pregnant.
Yeah, math is math. Again, there's formulas to things.
Yeah. Well, I had written another letter, but this letter was not really a please welcome me back letter. It was a I need answers to some things. I met with the elders in the very, very back. Our hall has one room and then a very back room. I met with the elders in that room. She was meeting with the elders in this room right next to me to confess her sin of being pregnant before married. The elders in my room, I asked them, how much more time do you want me to serve? Because I'm depressed. I hate my life. This does not feel like love. This does not feel like what God wants. Even in the Bible, when the shepherd and the 100 sheep, when the one went missing, that shepherd left those 99, went and got that sheep, carried it back in its bosom. He didn't sit it in the corner and say, sit there until I decide you can come back. Sit there until I decide you've served enough time in that corner. He welcomed that sheep back and put it back into the flock. I said, you're not being a shepherd right now. You're not.
That went over well.
But not like when you pull their own Bible against them.
I applaud it. And we could also go prodigal son returns. There's lots of things where people, would just be accepted back. But yeah, they don't like to be challenged.
No. And the one guy, he said, Alyssa, I'm never letting you back. And I said, okay. And that meeting, I brought a knife in my purse because I wanted my blood on their carpet. I wanted them to see how bad it hurt, how bad I needed something. Sorry.
No, don't apologize. That's incredibly heavy stuff. I can understand. I mean, they push people to the brink psychologically with the psychological torture tactics that they employ, like shunning. I'm so sorry that you had to feel that low.
Yeah, when they bowed their heads to pray, I actually pulled it out. And I was like, what are you doing, Alyssa? What are you doing? So I met with them. And in the room next to me, I'm in this room because I had sex before marriage and felt bad and confessed. And in the room next to me, my sister is confessing that she had sex before marriage, got pregnant, lied to everybody, and forced everybody to come to her Jehovah's Witness wedding. And they gave her a public reproof, a slap on the wrist, and made her. And I was like, why doesn't she have to go through all of this? She was right alongside me, partying, screwing everything that walked. She was there. Why does she get a slap on the wrist and I'm being told that I'm never going to be allowed back in? So I went home that night and I called my cousin in Tennessee, who was worldly, and I explained to him everything that was going on. And he said, why don't you come out here? Why don't you come out here? So the next meeting came around, and my father, I'm trying not to say his name, but I call them by their first names because they're not my mom and dad anymore. So, but I'm trying not to say it.
Fair enough. Okay.
My father came upstairs and he says, are you getting ready? And I said, I'm not doing this anymore. And he said, then get out. I said, okay, well, I'm going to go to Tennessee with my cousin. He's offered to give me a space for just a little bit. And my dad said, okay. And this time, at least, I was given time to pack up. My father even offered to help move me out there with furniture and that kind of stuff. So at least this time, it wasn't just a middle of the night, get out of my house. It was okay, we'll do this. And I was about late 18 to almost being 19. And I went out there and, went into my wild a little bit, went into my wild party times, kind of.
Sure.
I like to use the analogy of Jehovah's Witnesses hold you like a spring as a teenager. And then when you get out on your own, you're going everywhere. So I went everywhere. And
they kind of teach you that worldly people are wild, right? And they tell you, they set an expectation that you're going to have to go out there and wild out to be like everybody else who's out there, right? So you go out and you do what you think you ought to do. Plus you have a lot of pent up energy.
Yeah.
And pain to escape.
Yeah. And, you, as a girl, I'm sure boys feel it too, but my experience as a young girl, when you didn't get that love and attention that you needed and you don't recognize the abuse that you've gone through, you end up in a really bad relationship for the first couple times.
Oh, it's very common. Most ex-Jehovah's Witnesses are going out finding unavailable people or abusers to get into relationships with because that feels like home.
Yeah.
We don't know how to be in healthy relationships. We have to learn that. We have to get healthy ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. So I ended up in a bad relationship at 19 and I ended up marrying him because I was stupid. I ignored every red flag on the face of the planet with that person. But when I got engaged to him at 19, after knowing him for maybe a month, I called my dad and I said, I had been living with this guy already. So it was probably maybe like 4 months. But I said, he asked me to marry him. I said yes. And my dad said, well, that's better than living in sin. Hung up the phone. And that was the last time I ever heard my dad.
Those are literally the last words he ever said?
Last words he ever said to me. The last time I talked to my mom, we didn't talk before this, but I was actually married at 21 to this guy. So we had a little bit long engagement. And I called her for the first time in several years. And I said, I need to know how to get my high school transcript because I'm actually applying for college. And she says, you barely passed high school. Good luck. And hung up the phone. And that was the last time I talked to her.
Wow. You just really see the, you mentioned earlier, the coldness. I mean, everything from going back to that moment where the elder said, I will never let you back. You see that this is just about authority. These are just people who you have betrayed their authority And so they have no feelings left for you. It's all about power and authority.
Exactly. And when I got out, I actually started reconnecting with some friends that had been disfellowshipped before. And the things that I learned that was said to them during their process, the judicial committees and the processes, and the comparing the disgusting things that were said to me, just, you know, when you confess to having sex before marriage, it should just be simply, okay, you had sex.
Yeah.
Let's move on. No, they wanted to know the depth. Was it vaginal? Was it anal? Did you give a blowjob? Did you do this? Did you have an orgasm? Did you think of me when you did it? The disgusting things that come out of those elders' mouths during these is mind-blowing.
Think of me when you did it?
That was not my personal, it was somebody else's, but yes,
Wow.
they asked, did you think of me when you did it?
Wow. I mean, look, it's all every bit of it. It's none of their damn business that you had sex anyway. B, it's certainly none of their business any details thereof. C, what the hell?
Yeah.
That's just the abusive. It is, those judicial committees are sexual assault.
Yeah. I had a friend that the elder walked in with a dirty dish rag over his shoulder and threw it on the table in front of her. And he says, "You're dirty like that dish rag. You'll never be clean again." And she's like, "They make washing machines."
Wow, nice little witty, quick reply. But
throwing a dirty dish rag at someone and calling them that.
But what kind of insecure piece of shit has to walk into a room with his two buddies where there's some young girl sitting there and like be all dramatic with a dirty towel? How bad must you feel about yourself that you've got to take out your misery on some young lady? That's pathetic.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I mean, I know that there are a lot of elders that were in it thinking that they could help people. You know, there were some sincere ones, but there's just also some stone cold narcissists who just get off on the power and they love to make people squirm. And that those people existed too. And I'm sorry that you, and it sounds like some of your friends, had to face those kinds of individuals. Nobody should be subjected to that. That's horrible. It's just more abuse from an abusive organization.
I actually remember hearing, because like I said, these elders like attacked me and my sisters. And even though my family was a strong Jehovah's Witness family, my dad was an elder, my mom was a pioneer, I was a pioneer. They just kept accusing us of all this stuff because they just knew that we were doing these horrible things. They knew that we were these bad apples, which I hate that term. We were these bad apples that just needed to be weeded out. And I remember after I was disfellowshipped and left, and after my sister went on public reproof and my older sister disassociated herself, I remember hearing from a friend that elder said, "Yeah, we finally got rid of them Drew girls," because that was my maiden name, Drew. Finally got rid of them Drew girls. Well, you pushed me out of it because my brain, you were accusing me of doing all of this stuff that I was like, I might as well do it. I'm in trouble for it anyways.
Yeah, I mean, Alyssa, I can't tell you how many people you're talking about congregationally, the elders having some sort of vendetta or whatever, but I can't tell you how many people, I mean, from myself to my wife to many others that I've worked with that had parents who just always knew their kids were up to no good. Just these raids on your room, like looking for contraband, always sure in some way that you were doing something wrong and they were going to catch you. And it's just this, like, really, like, why are you so giddy about trying to catch your kids doing something wrong? That is messed up. Again, you're a nobody looking for power off the back of your kids. Grow up. It's
Yeah.
terrible.
Yeah. And it's almost, I almost feel like my mother was relieved when she no longer had to deal with me. But then I hear that she uses me as making herself the victim, like, oh, my daughter doesn't talk to me and my daughter has gone astray. And oh, I just wish I could have done things differently. And I hear her using this to get the sympathy for her. And so when I heard her saying that about me and my oldest sister, I actually found her on Facebook. This was several years ago. And I wrote her a letter and I said, you will take my name out of your mouth because I've held my funeral for you. You're not in my life anymore. You don't know me. You don't know what I've been through anymore. You don't know what I've become. You're not the mother I should have had my entire life. I held my funeral for that. So you need to do it too. Of course, she didn't listen. So,
Oh, no, because she's getting something out of this, right?
Yeah.
She can now have the identity that, you know, my daughter is an apostate or my daughter is this or that. And then everybody, oh, I'm so sorry that, you know, this is how your child turned out. You know,
Yeah.
it's just Jehovah's Witnesses are so about victim blaming. They blame the victim of just everything. They're just it's absurd. They're ridiculous human beings.
But what's really funny about my parents is they actually had to move from Texas to Maine because the congregation treated them so horribly after I left.
Oh, so they got the because the witnesses also do, you know, of course, gaslighting, nothing's ever consistent. So then there's the other side where it's like, well, you as the parent should have done better as a parent in raising your children. What's wrong with you as that parent? Also, your dad. I mean, how can you be an elder when your kids have all gone sideways?
That's what they used against him.
Yeah, you should have done a better job, Pops.
And then I think my middle sister actually took it upon herself to be everything that the parents wanted because she's still a Jehovah's Witness. She's still their perfect little angel child.
People please.
Because I think she actually would probably blame me because, you know, she's the narcissist too that's going to use me to get sympathy for herself. Well, because my sisters didn't do it, the burden was on me to do it. I know that she's like that. So my dad stepped down as an elder. My mom stopped full-time pioneering, and the congregation didn't send out like the shepherding calls to them. And my parents, I told you they were both musicians and singers. They used to be the most proud singers during the song. They stopped singing during the songs, and no one in the congregation noticed that. And my mom would just sit there and cry throughout the whole meeting, and no one would reach out to her to help. So I was hearing this from my other sister who was still kind of in, and I was hopeful. Oh my God, are they going to get out? Oh my God, are they going to get out? Are they going to see this horrible thing? And then I hear they moved to Maine and they became elder and pioneer again and went right back into it because a new congregation, they could manipulate them to think whatever they wanted to think.
Well, yeah. And some people, I mean, 1975 didn't get people out, you know, I mean, it got some people out, but a lot of people stayed, right? People willingly walks with their own kids into the I went to a Holocaust museum last weekend, so it's on my mind. You know, Jehovah's Witnesses willingly walked into those concentration camps when they could have just signed a piece of paper, walked out, and then gone and preached anywhere else in the world that they wanted, or whatever the case may have been. And they willingly took their children in there to die as martyrs. You know, there are people that they're so attached to this thing, It's giving them something and they will do anything for it. It's their addiction.
It is an addiction. And they were getting the love and sympathy from the new congregation in Maine to re-strengthen their love for it all. So
if you
when
can
I
be happy without 2 of your 3 kids,
yeah,
that you willingly shun,
yeah,
then something is wrong with you.
yeah. And then, you know, I found my own path. I found my own happiness. I went through a lot of therapy to to figure out, you know, why didn't my parents love me? Why couldn't my parents love me?
Yeah,
How can
they don't even know love.
exactly. How I went through the whole how can anyone love me if they couldn't love me? And then I started healing and I started moving on. And then 2019, I get a text from my sister, the one I no longer talk to either of my sisters now, but I get a text saying, Dad died today.
Wow.
And I was like, okay. And, you know, I told you I already held the funeral for them in my head. Like I did a whole therapy session of they're gone. You're never going to get them back. And I went to work. I was working as an OR nurse at this time, going through the motions, changing my scrubs, clocking in. And I walk out and this one girl looks at me. She goes, "What's wrong, sweetie?" And I broke down. My dad died today. And she's like, "Why are you here?" And I was like, because he's not my dad. He's not anything to me. I haven't talked to him, seen him since I was 19 years old. Been so long. Why am I crying? And I came home. They sent me home because I was a blubbering mess. And I got sent home and I came back to my husband and, you know, he told me, well, your brain is probably finally realizing that there's never going to be a chance.
Yeah.
You always hold on to that possibility of them maybe wanting you back and maybe wanting something with you. And then for it to be the final, like he's dead, he's gone. It's the final. And then there was the whole, am I going to hear from my mom? Is she going to try to reach out and tell me that he passed away? Am I going to be invited to the funeral? And I was left off the obituary.
As one of the survivors?
Yeah, I was not there. Neither was my other sister, my oldest sister. Her kids were on the obituary, but my older sister's name was not.
So I take it that you also then were not thought of when it came to the funeral or service or whatever was held there too?
No, was not invited. Not my mother never even reached out. My other sister never reached out. Nothing.
Understand.
Which, yeah.
I lived some of that myself. So I understand. I was not invited to my dad's funeral, and I was called to, my mom called me to ask if my name could be included in, I guess, the list of survivors mentioned at the Kingdom Hall. And I was like, well, like it or not, I'm your son, so do whatever you want, knock yourself out. I don't care either way. And so I guess they used my name there, but like, it's just, yeah, it's really, these are just, you're forced to grieve again alone, not with your family. You're forced to grieve again that loss, as you know, now it's just final. It's final. You know, we can grieve in our heads. I've done the same thing. I've buried my parents, but my dad died like 6 months after I was shunned, so there wasn't that much time, and so it was very quick. But I totally understand that it's really hard. It's a messed up thing that is just not how normal healthy humans act. So of course you hurt, and I'm sure we all hurt for you listening, because it sucks. It's awful. Parents shouldn't treat their kids this way.
Yeah.
So
I think I once actually mentioned at the funeral in their little funeral pamphlet, but that's because an old family friend flew up there to support my mother, and she's the one who put that together. So I don't think she thought not to include my name.
Yeah.
So
by accident.
By accident.
Yeah. They are Jehovah's Witnesses. It's just so cruel. They're very cruel people.
Yeah.
Very cruel.
And no one ever reached out to me after all of that to see how I was. I had one that I grew up with that he's not very strong, that every now and then he'll add me to Facebook, kind of see what's going on, and then disappear. Like they come and spy on me still. And I just actually heard the other day that somebody that I haven't talked to since I was 15 in the congregation is still talking bad about me, about the lifestyle that I live, and that I'm a witch and I'm into the witchcraft and I worship the devil. And I'm like, it is 20 years later. Can you move on, please?
Well, I think that's one of the things, you have to see. And I mean, it even cuts to our parents. They're just like petulant children. They're not adults. They were in adult bodies, but they never grew up. They're children in the way that they behave and the way they throw their little fits, or how petty do you have to be like, this guy's running you down after all this time based on your lifestyle. Like, okay, sure. I don't care. I mean, I'm sure they talk about me or whatever. I'm sure I'm the devil, then I'll show up wearing devil horns. I mean, I don't care. It's dumb. It's all made up. So, but it's really ridiculous to watch them live out their silly, childish fairy tales.
It really is. And it's so petty the way that 20 years from now, they can't move on from that. They can't accept the fact that I have built a life that I am happy in and that they're not included in. And I think even my mother feels that way. My grandpa passed away and I had to go to his funeral out there in Tennessee. And that was the first time I've actually seen her in person since 19. And of course, she did not talk to me at all. She kind of listened to some jokes and stuff when I was talking to the rest of the family, but there was no talking to me, no comforting me. I just lost my grandpa, nothing like that. She did hug my husband, which was very weird. She said, "It's nice to meet you." And he's like, "I've been with your daughter for almost 10 years now. And now all of a sudden you realize, nice to meet you." But it was just very awkward and very weird. But I can see she never let go of that pettiness. Just that, oh, you moved on without me and I just can't let it go. I can't be happy for you. I can't accept it. And it was sad. It was pathetic. And I think it was a very healing experience for me, honestly, because I got to see her through my adult eyes, my healed eyes, and see who I never want to become.
Sure.
Because you always feel, oh, that's my mom. I'm going to turn into her. I'm going to be like her. And I realize now that I'm not anything like her. And it was very healing.
That's awesome. When you can go from the point in life where you're worried about your parents, let's say, being disappointed in you, to the point where now you can look at them and say, wow, I'm really disappointed in them. That's taking your power back. And when you realize that, I moved on because life moves on. I didn't move on without anybody intentionally. You chose not to come along. You've imprisoned yourself. You're the one who's shunning. My number's the same. I live at the same place. You could reach out if you wanted to talk. I can't.
Exactly.
You could. So
Exactly. It's not the fact that I chose my life without them. It's they chose their life without me.
Mhm.
And they are upset that my life didn't become shambles. Like they keep preaching to you, oh, when you go worldly, you're going to be so unhappy. You're going to be so burdened. You're going to be so disconnected. And I have found more connection in this life than I ever felt as a Jehovah's Witness. And they hate that.
Yeah, it's such a threat to them because they're still stuck in. If you can leave and find happiness, it shines a light on them and why they can't, why they're stuck in the same place they've been stuck in for decades. And it keeps causing them pain and they can't get out of it. So they want you to fail so that you'll come back, because misery loves company. They want you to come back and be miserable like them.
Yeah. But they want to disguise it as love. They want to disguise it as,
yeah,
we have to suffer, because if we're not suffering, that means we're on the devil's side. Remember? So we have to suffer, but we're going to do it together for a better outcome. Mm-hmm. So that's their disguising, and that they hold your family hostage to make you fall in line. And then when you don't fall in line, they take that family from you, thinking, oh, you're going to come back for it. That's what they're doing. You're going to come back for family. And then when you don't, it's like, oh, well, you were just a bad apple anyways.
Yeah, they're extorting you through your familial relationships, which is part of gaslighting. It's to take something that's near and dear to you and hold it against you, to use it against you in some way, to weaponize your relationships, to try to force you to do what they ultimately want you to do. And whether it's best for you or not, because they don't care about you, they care about them.
Yeah, they care about the numbers.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. And again, those types of things are just used, sadly, in so many toxic relationships and so many cults, religious cults. It can be used in politics. It can be used in so many ways to get rid of anyone that you don't like, because they're not who you are. And I'm sorry, again, that you have had to face the trauma of all of that, like so many of us have. But it is not and never was your fault. That's on them.
That's what I've had to come to the realization is my parents didn't love me, not because of anything I did, but because of how they were.
Yeah, because they don't know what love is, so they can't offer it.
Because this religion, this cult, doesn't teach love. Mm-mm. It teaches control. And to them, if you have control, you're in love. If you don't have control, you're out of love. So I don't know why they push unconditional love so much in that congregation, in that cult, because they do not have unconditional love. There are so many conditions that are attached to that acceptance and love that you might as well write a whole nother Bible of everything that they want you to do.
Oh, sure. Again, gaslighting is telling you that you have unconditional love while giving you all the conditions by which you are to remove and withhold your love, which of course in that case is just control, because you shouldn't really be withholding love in that way. And I don't know your parents' histories, but many of our parents, if you really look back in their families and such, they came from places that had no love. And so it's just a generational cycle of abuse, so to speak, where you just have these people passing down this lack of love. They don't know what it really is. It is control. And then you and I and so many others are the people who break those cycles and try to figure out what love actually is, and then express it. Sounds like you got at least one kiddo, I think you said. And so, you get to change that cycle.
Yeah.
But it's hard.
It is hard because I have learned about myself that I can let go of people very easily. I can cut you out of my life and feel
Yes.
nothing.
Well, because we were taught not to attach to people from the jump.
But it also comes down to I recognize the toxicity in some people, and I don't want to invite that back into my life. So I'm like, okay, you're gone, you're out. Bye, you've lost. And I have the problems that I'm still working through. And like I said, I do not speak to my older sister because I recognize that she still had those toxic traits in her. So I chose on that one to cut that off because there was still so much. She did not go through the same healing process that I did. She did not go through the same acceptance. And there was just so much damage still done to her that was coming off into our relationship. So I said, I can't do this anymore. We've got to go our separate ways. And then, of course, as soon as I stopped talking to her, she reconnected with our mother. So I was like, that was a little fishy there.
Yeah, a
Were
little
you
bit.
reporting back to the mother all the time? Did you ever actually cut it off? But anyways, I recognize toxicity in people very easy now, but probably too much because I kind of isolated myself into my own little circle because I don't want to deal with any of that. I don't want to
Oh,
even give people the opportunity to cut me off.
there you go, right? It's I'm gonna get you before you can get me. So I either just won't ever allow myself to attach to people, or I'm gonna cut you before you cut me. And it's all trying to find the balance in that over time. Healing is a process, not an event. It takes time, and we're all on that path. Um, so you then have been out now for how many years?
Oh gosh, let me do some maths here. Technically, from disfellowshipping, it was 18 years, but from trying to get back, it's been about 16 and a half, 17 years.
Okay. And now, there's parts to being out. You can be out behaviorally because you want to maybe there are normal ways that people want to show affection or whatever, and then they're looking for that in this world. There's also the waking up mentally and emotionally to not only what was done to us, but also to waking up to the doctrines and things like that. How long would you say, or where would you say maybe you found your mental and emotional awakening from it all?
I struggled really hard for the first few years being a POMI. What is it? The POMI,
Yeah, physically out, mentally in. Yeah, and that's normal because especially if you're out for behavioral reasons, then there's these other things that need to be addressed and looked at too.
Yeah. So I still was trying to find a way to connect to Jehovah. I was still trying to find a way. Okay, they're not going to allow me back in, but can I maybe still be on Jehovah's good side somehow? And it wasn't until after I'd gotten married at 21 to a narcissist who was very abusive, I started recognizing his traits as traits of Jehovah's Witnesses. And I was like, wait a minute, I thought they said that only existed in worldly people. I thought these godly people were supposed to be so much holier than thou and so much better than these worldly people. And here I am with a worldly guy who's treating me the same way that they treated me. And that's when I really started questioning my own beliefs about it. And that was an overnight event. I woke up one morning after he had punched me in the back of the head and put my head through a glass window, that I woke up the next morning and went, Jehovah doesn't exist. He wouldn't allow people like that to exist in his congregation, because that's the things that this person was saying to me were things that the elders said to me my whole life, were things that my parents said to me my whole life. So pretty much overnight, I became agnostic, just questioning things, but knowing Jehovah does not exist. Everything that I was ever taught is a freaking lie. And that kind of was very eye-opening and healing for just a moment, and then spiraling into, okay, so what is the truth? And I reached out to all different ways of life. I kind of collected religion ideas here and there. I turned to Buddhism. I turned to yoga, that, you know, the what they call demonic dance.
Spiritual type of yoga,
Yeah.
not just yoga for exercise.
Yeah, but what Jehovah's Witnesses called the demonic dance, which is why I wasn't allowed to do yoga. I turned to yoga and meditation because I felt it was allowing the universe to into my brain and to help me get past this. I did try out other religions. I could not get into organized religion after that. It all felt culty. It all felt weird. I never got into any of that. But I started picking pieces of, you know, Buddhism and Hinduism and Wicca and pagan and all sorts of stuff to create my own ideas.
Mm-hmm.
I do not believe in a God. I do not believe in a one being. I'm more along the lines of there's multiple beings, but they're not gods. I believe they were actual beings that existed and now are spirits to help guide. That's kind of where I'm at right now. It could change. Who knows?
Sure. Well, and that's all part of you looking for what feels real and believable and things that you can connect to. What about, I mean, was there a point in any of this when you started, I don't know, going on like jwfacts.com or like learning about the realities of the thing that you had been involved in? Did you spend any time doing that? Like actually going, because you're talking about the piece where you're kind of reconstructing or constructing maybe for the first time your own faith of sorts. Was there a deconstruction or time that you spent waking up to the realities of the stuff that actually does go in Jehovah's Witnesses and realizing you're not alone and seeing something wrong with it?
There was a time, yes. And it was a lot of reaching out to people online and being involved in online stuff, but a lot of deep fueled times
Sure.
of brain exploration and just being able to open up and start talking about what doesn't make sense. And I may have been a little militant about it online for a while. I would see Jehovah's Witnesses come into like the forums of atheists and agnostics and try to preach. And I'd be like, no, here's how we're going to go about this. And I would just deconstruct every single thing that they were talking about. I knew my Bible, my New World Translation Bible, front to back, specifically to take these people down, to specifically to counter anything that they came at me with. I forgot most of that now because I have not picked up any Bible for so long that I could not tell you scripture, but I used to know their Bible front to back. I knew all of their publications. I actually continued to study their new publications to see what they were saying so that I could counter them. And then I realized my piece was a whole lot more worth it. So I kind of dropped.
Good for you. Good for you.
I do a little bit every now and then if I see them being really weird on like a TikTok video or something. I'm like, okay, now let me tell you how this is not going to go. And let me tell you where you're wrong. And of course I get blocked because you say something that's true and they block you. But there was that deconstructing time. It was mainly just to give my brain that way of releasing it and forgetting it and releasing it and forgetting it, which is very healing. I highly suggest everyone to just talk it out. Even if you're talking to a mirror, just talk it out, because that's how you get rid of it.
Sure. And it's not, well, we all, of course, process things in different ways, but The goal eventually, I think, or a healthy goal for most people is to, at some point, to become an ex-JW. To, like you're saying, at this point, you don't even look at the Bible or any of their publications. You're just doing your thing. I mean, that part of us will always be there. And, because it was our formative years, it was our relationships. We may still have people attached to it, but to be able to find ourselves in a place where we feel more comfortable with the fact that we've processed a lot of it. We've got other things in our lives that make us feel full and that we connect to, whatever that is for us, to have our own identities outside of that as well. I mean, I work in the ex-JW community every day through my cult recovering coaching practice, through my podcast, through groups, different things. But that's not who I am. I've got all kinds of stuff. There's lots of things. When I'm done with this, I'm going to go out and be who I am in this world in ways. I'm much more than just this. And I think that it's important for us all to figure out who we are aside from this thing that we were once involved in. And I'm glad that it sounds like you've done a lot of exploration and finding yourself and things that you actually connect to today, which, I mean, that's what life's about.
Yeah. I finally told myself that they weren't worth my anger.
Yeah.
That it was just feeding their idea of the outside world is horrible for you by showing them how angry I was towards them. So to show them and really give them the full on FU, I became happy. I dropped the anger, I dropped the hatred. I don't hate them. I hate what they do to people. I hate how they ruin lives. I hate how they ruin families. But I look back at what my mom and dad did, and they were just doing it because they thought that's what God wanted.
Yeah. And because they're not well.
Yeah. Because they don't know, they don't connect to it. If they really connected to this God, they would know that God does not want this.
And if their God does want it, then he's a messed up God.
That's no God I want to worship. And that's what I told. I've had some Jehovah's Witnesses knock on my door, and I indulged them for a while, but now I'm just fellowship, go away, please. But one of them says, well, what if you have to face Jehovah one day? And I said, let me at him.
Yeah, I got something to say.
I've got questions for him. Because if this is what he wanted, he needs to be dethroned.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, so you're going to be the one to do it? And I said, I will claw my way to that throne, and I will show people what love is.
Well, I mean, so far he's not been. So far he's failed in the earth, right? The earth, he created that, and that went sideways. He created the heavens, and that's gone sideways. So I mean, so far he's 0 for 2. I guess the new system's not going to go sideways. Of course it is, because everything that he touches so far has gone sideways. Why wouldn't that too? A lot of imperfection coming from something so perfect, but that's another story.
Oh, they did not like that. I told them, I said, this is a very imperfect system and congregation for something that comes from something so perfect. And they were, why are you questioning? And they just did not like the fact that my brain did not just fall in line.
Yeah, blindly obey.
Yeah, I do not blindly obey. And my poor husband knows I do not blindly obey. But that's part of why he loves me, because I do not just listen to what someone has to say and call it truth. I go seek my own truth. I go seek my own answers. And if I'm wrong one day, I'm wrong. If I have to face my maker, I face my maker.
I'll do it knowing that I did the best that I could and that I was authentic, and at least I wasn't fake.
I'll do it knowing that I did give unconditional love.
Yep. Absolutely. So if there was anything today that you could say to those who shun you. I don't know if you would choose family or who it would be. Is there anything that you would say, or do you have anything to say?
Was it worth it?
Mm.
Just has it been worth it? Was losing me worth it? And if their answer is no, then why? If their answer is yes, then F you.
Yeah, I love how succinct and how poignant that is. So talking about things being worth it, going on then into, your own life that you have been building apart for them because of their choices. What are you involved in today? What are the things that you find worth it? What are the things that light you up in life today and that make your life worth living out loud?
My goodness. My husband is one of the most amazing people I've ever met in my entire life. He has helped me heal and love myself so much. My daughter's amazing. I love nature. We just got back from Colorado, and we pulled up to Pikes Peak, and the clouds cleared just enough, and I said, this is God. This is what people should be worshiping, is nature, is the beauty of it. Some people look at a sunset or a mountain and they feel their own God. That's great if you feel connected to that. I'm connected to nature. I'm connected to tangible things you can feel, things you can see, facts. I am a witch. I'm not into witchcraft, like the devil craft, that kind of stuff. No, I'm a nature witch. I really connect to following the moon cycles and following nature. I'm planting my garden right now that we just bought a house back in February. So I was like, we can actually put permanent garden stuff in. So we're actually planting everything in the backyard. Everything that we're planting has a use, medicinal, herbal, food, all kinds of stuff. That's where I'm connecting. I do have the beings that I kind of follow their path a little bit more. I have a Buddha tattoo right here.
Oh, nice.
And then I still like a lot of the things that Buddha taught. I like some of the things that the pagan mythologies are teaching. So I dive into those. And it's just knowing that I'm not confined to one thing. You cannot be connected to just one thing.
Yeah, wisdom can be found in lots of places, can't it?
Yeah. So I was able to really explore what life had to offer. And I think I have found a pretty peaceful place. There has been some disruption of peace from other people, but I kind of try to keep that out of my life. And I protect my peace probably a little too hard. It's just me, my husband, my daughter here. So most of the time, but that's what makes me happy. It's just being with them, knowing that my husband loves me unconditionally.
And loving your daughter unconditionally.
Yeah, and loving her unconditionally. She's a pretty good kid. She's a pretty good kid. And I think she, unfortunately, had to be with me during my healing times.
Sure.
So I think that put a burden on her a little I feel like she feels like she has to be good to not disrupt, but she can still disrupt. She can still do it. But I think it helped us connect a little bit more because she knows that I'm not a perfect parent and that I'm just trying my best. That
Nobody is. So
I very well could be this horrible, evil, angry person, but she sees that I'm trying not to. So I think she sees the effort, at least, that goes behind the gentle parenting that comes with me.
Well, that's awesome. I'm glad that you have people around you that you care about I'm glad that you and that care about you unconditionally. And I'm glad that you have connected with things around you that you connect to. Again, to live a disconnected life is not a happy life. To feel connection, whether it's in this garden you're planting or watching the cycles of the moon or going to Colorado, which is a place I would love to go to at some point. I love nature too. I think, you know, that's I'm glad that you're finding the places that you find connection and peace, because that's something that you know, little Alyssa, who was baptized at 9, deserves. That 9-year-old girl deserves a chance at a real life, not the real life, as the witnesses say, but a real life. And you get to find what that is for you and her. And I love that you're doing that.
I try.
That's all any of us can do. That's all any of us can do. Well, I appreciate you telling your story, Alyssa.
Yeah, it needs to be out there. This cult is so damaging.
Yeah. And that's why we tell these stories. You know, I have people at times who leave dumb comments on my stuff, and they're like, you know, why are you so obsessed with Jehovah's Witnesses? Why do you need everybody to believe like you? It's like, no, you don't. Alyssa here, I don't think believes quite like I do. I don't need anybody to believe like me. But what I do need is to help people tell their stories, because that's A, cathartic for you when you listen back to this. You're going to find catharsis, but B, it's also going to help all these other people who have also been damaged and hurt by an abusive cult that needs to be put in its place. The name of this right above my head is Shunned. And right now, Watchtower and Jehovah's Witnesses are trying to act like they don't shun people in this world and taking down their videos because they're cowards. And I named this thing Shunned to shine a light on that stuff. And, you know, you're just another beautiful soul who has come here and expressed what you've been through at the hands of this ugly cult. And so I'm glad that, you know, you're doing it and that other people are doing it too, because there need to be, you know, more voices out there and more stories to show this other side, the realities of this thing that, you know, so many people just think are just, well, they're just nice people. It's just a nice religion. I don't care what you believe. Just don't be an asshole and hurt people.
Yeah. And people who are still in, who might possibly be questioning things, they need to see that life does not crumble. It's hard. It is so hard, but it does not crumble outside of this religion. You find your happiness, you find your family, and you move past it. It takes a lot of time and healing and some very angry nights, but you do move past it to the point that you can live a full and happy life outside of the religion.
Of course. Of course. Doesn't mean that we don't have tears over past traumas, but it also doesn't mean that we can't find tears over beautiful moments today as well. You know, happy tears, actually experiencing joy in this life and connection that you will never, ever, ever find in a Kingdom Hall.
Yeah. I don't cry because it still hurts. I cry because you wish you can go back and hug your little 9-year-old self and tell them it's going to be okay.
Of course. Of course. I often tell people when I'm working with them in my coaching practice that, you know, at one point in life, there was the purest form of you, just a little you running around. All you wanted to do was play in the dirt, play with your friends, play toys, be on the computer, whatever. But you just wanted to play, and there were no burdens, no encumbrances. And then at some point in life, you start getting covered over with expectations of others and judgments and traumas and experiences and responsibilities and all these things. But the goal when I work with people is to remove those things so we can get back to that little you and go have fun in this world. Life's too short to not have fun. There's a lot of beautiful things to connect to. Of course, we still got to do things that aren't always fun. We all have responsibilities and work, and life can be ugly at times, but that doesn't have to be the dominating force in our lives. And we can do so much for, for me, it's for 8-year-old Mike, who had been non-Jehovah's Witness until my parents lost their mind and joined a cult when I was 8, right? And then life changed, and happy Mike became this sullen, depressed Mike, this very angry Mike that, came from the organization. And so I've worked really hard on getting back to 8-year-old me, who was happy before all that mess. Some of us don't have that version, but there's still somewhere in there, there's a part of us or somebody that's we're taking with us throughout this life. And just, you have that 9-year-old that I was thinking of, but maybe there's even before then a little 5-year-old you with a dress and dirty knees playing out or whatever. That's what we need. We need to get out and just enjoy this world. It is there.
Yeah, it is there. And it was not there inside of that religion. It wasn't.
Not at all. So thank you for sharing, for you, for 9-year-old you, and for everybody else who's listening, because we can all learn from each other.
Yeah. Well, thank you for giving us the platform for it.